Cold open question to kick us off for the Wednesday, May 22nd edition of the Just Basketball Show. Wes Goldberg. I'm going to borrow from Chris's playbook on our Monday episode and just dive right into an awesome Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals. What was your favorite moment of Celtics-Pacers that just wrapped before we hit record?
Wow, what a great question. It comes from the losing team, right? It's the two end of clock shots by Tyrese Halliburton. He hits that logo three-pointer going into halftime to completely erase a 12-point lead that the Celtics established in the opening minutes of the game. And the end of the third quarter gets this running forward, rattling jumper to fall as the buzzer goes off. And it was just big shot after big shot for Tyrese Halliburton until, of course, he let the game almost quite literally slip through his hands.
Mine was Jaylen Brown somehow banking in a three from the corner. Not sure if you could do that if you wanted to. I won't go so far as to say I've never seen that in a basketball game. I think we all have, but that doesn't make any miracle backboard touching jump shot any less crazy when it happens. And Pascal Siakam probably fouled him there too. We'll get into all of it and more. Let's go. Welcome into the Just Basketball Show. It is Wednesday, May 22nd. We are your 3 times a week dose of all things hoops. I'm Brendon Kleen. That over there is Wes Goldberg. Don't forget to hit follow or subscribe if you're finding us for the first time. We're free and available everywhere, including YouTube. You can also find us across social media, X, Instagram, TikTok, and more. Bonus content, extra content, analysis all throughout our social media channels. Support for today's episode, guys, comes from BetMGM. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use the bonus code JustBasketball, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager at BetMGM. Here's how it works. Step 1, download the BetMGM Sportsbook app on iOS or Android and sign up using code JustBasketball. Step 2, deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. Step 3, you will receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if the bet loses. Just make sure to use the bonus code JustBasketball when you sign up. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 or older to wager. Terms and conditions apply. 133-128 in overtime, West. The Celtics stole this one. I don't really know another way to put it. This was Indiana's game to win. A lot of my notes still on the Google Doc that I have up are based upon a Pacers win, so we are riding a little bit blind here. I think we all are. I don't think this is the outcome anyone would have expected. Basically, from that Halliburton 3 to close the half that you mentioned on, Indiana was cruising. It felt like this was theirs. It felt like this was going to be what is going on with Boston, panic time and all that. And yet the Celtics somehow come home with a win.
Big J.R. Smith vibes from the Pacers in this one. Obviously referring to the Cavs losing to the Warriors in the 2018 Finals in Game 1, and it looked like the Cavs were going to kind of go into that series, huge underdogs, and maybe steal the first one and set the tone for that series. And it felt exactly like that was what was happening for the Pacers in this game. They seemed like the team of destiny. They seemed like the team doing all of the right things. And then they have the lead late, and all they have to do is inbound the basketball, make their free throws, and the game is over. And they go into Boston and shock everybody and go up 1-0 in this series. And then, of course, what happens? Andrew Nembhard inbounds it to Pascal Siakam, or at least tries to. Jaylen Brown's able to sort of knock it loose, goes off of Pascal Siakam's hands. It goes out of bounds. I don't know what was going on that inbounds play. Nobody going to the ball. Everybody sort of running sideways or away from the ball. I don't really know what the plan was there. It didn't really look like Boston was interfering all that much with their ability to kind of come to the ball a little bit. So just a complete blown possession and inbound there by the Pacers. And then, of course, you get the miracle shot on the ensuing inbound by Boston. Drew Holiday gets it across the court to Jaylen Brown. No opportunity. Everybody's going to bang the Pacers for not fouling up 3 at the moment there, but including LeBron James, who went on Twitter and said, this is why you foul up 3. but they didn't have an opportunity. Drew Holiday, bullet pass to Brown in the corner. By the time Derek White sets this great down screen that nudges Siakam just a little bit on the closeout, there's no chance for anybody to intentionally foul there. And if anything, maybe Siakam got away with a foul call there to what you said earlier. Could have been maybe a 4-point play for Jaylen Brown. Brown drills it. Incredible shot. Even after the blown inbound, even after all that, you still, for the Pacers, I don't know. How many times did Jaylen Brown make that shot? 2 times out of 10? It's not great odds there. So he makes that shot. Game ends up going and then in the next play, Tyrese Haliburton gets a clean look directly on the inbound. Al Horford does not close out on him. I forget if it was Tatum or Drew Holiday who were supposed to be on him, gets screened off just for a moment. Haliburton turns around. It didn't look like he expected to be that open. And he hesitates for just a second. And that hesitation was just enough for Boston to sort of close out. You probably could have still gotten off the clean look, but after you hesitate, you don't want to take a shot out of rhythm in that way. And so he ends up running around the perimeter, goes to the right side, forces up a bad shot, has no chance. We get overtime. Tatum scores 10 points in overtime, takes the game over then. Game over. Boston escapes.
Escapes it's exactly the right word. Haliburton, I think, is the right place to go here for 2 specific reasons. One is that last possession where I do think it's a little bit of the downside that we have seen at times throughout the playoffs with this guy. And it sucks to have him be one of the culprits here. You mentioned a lot of other ones in a game where he had 25 and 10 and only 3 turnovers and was mostly awesome. But he doesn't really want to get to the basket generally, and especially, tight game situation like that. And a lot of the jumpers and things that he does take, the gather, it's so elaborate, elongated. And so it did feel a little bit like crap. That this is actually more open than I thought, but somehow I'm less comfortable. The other reason I want to focus on him is I do think down the stretch and then into overtime, I don't know exactly the possession or the moment when Boston made this switch, but it impacted the game in a big way, which was putting Drew Holiday onto Haliburton. It was definitely that way for most of overtime. And you could see, again, another layer of discomfort and second guessing. And that was enough in a game where White had been on him a lot, and they're getting switches and they're, pulling second defenders out and all the different things Haliburton does. But just to change who his primary guy was late in the game, I think went a long way to just disrupting him and getting that late edge, which frankly, you just went through everything that went down the last few minutes, and then obviously Tatum is great in overtime, Wes, but I still am not even sure how this was a 1-point game. It felt like it should have been a couple possessions in Indiana's direction as this wound down, but credit to Boston, I guess, for just continuing to stay in it. I did not love their shot selection down the stretch, which is maybe why it felt that way. I think I have 4 different Celtics who took pull-up threes in the final 5 minutes of possessions where they really needed a basket. This was everything we don't like to see about Boston, and yet somehow they got the win.
Well, I think the reason why it was so close was the free throw discrepancy. I mean, Boston, 24 of 30 from the line. The Pacers, 9 of 10. The Celtics outscored them by, I'm going to do quick math here. What is that, 13? 15 points at the free throw line. You're going to learn that I'm very bad at math, especially quick math. But look, that was a big part of it. Credit to Boston for being aggressive. This is not going to be a situation. We're recording this right after the game. I don't know if Rick Carlisle is going to go up there and point to this free throw discrepancy at things that he's done before, right? But small market Indiana against bigger sized market Boston. But look, the Celtics earned it, right? They got to the line. Yep. They were the more physical team. They were trying to get to the basket. To your point, the Pacers, Tyrese Haliburton doesn't really get to the basket all that much. He's almost opposite, Weird House Mirror Ben Simmons. Remember that stat that was going on forever? Ben Simmons never shoots threes, but this is how many threes he creates. He creates more threes than anybody else in the league. I think that was a Haberstroh stat that went around for a while. Haliburton's the opposite of that. He doesn't really get to the basket, but he creates so many shots at the basket with those jump passes over the top of the defense to Siakam and Turner on the roll and things like that. Sure. So it works, right? And in this game, Turner was so good. Siakam was so good. It's just like, man, you got big shots from Obi Toppin, especially in that first half while they were making that comeback. You got great shots from TJ McConnell, who does get to the basket. Some big shots by Andrew Nembhard late in this game.
Yeah.
It just felt like everything that you could have wanted to go right went right until the very end. And then you do have to point the finger back at Halliburton. There's a number of bad turnovers. We mentioned the inbounds play at the end. But another one, Halliburton had 2 really bad turnovers in overtime while this was still a game, despite how disappointing the end of regulation was.
Just dropped it out of bounds on the sideline against Holiday in that one spot. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, Holiday's going to get a lot of credit for hounding him on there, and he deserves a little bit. But I think that to me gets chalked up as an unforced turnover. And the Holiday thing, like him not being so easy to start switching. Like he was a little bit more stubborn, not giving up the switches easy in the second half as opposed to the first half. Just Boston as a team, but especially like you mentioned when they put Holiday on him as the primary assignment. I think that's part of it. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking for the good stuff from the Celtics, I thought the shots were mostly good. And that's sort of being graded on the Celtics curve where you kind of understand, like to your point, they're going to have a bunch of ones that make you scratch your head a little bit. For the Celtics, they were mostly good shots. I didn't think they were relying on their talent quite as much. They got to the free throw line, and I think one of the talking points coming out of this game, just like it was in the New York series, is, well, if you're the Pacers, you got to feel really good because this game was played to your pace. But I actually thought the Celtics, despite the fact that they don't want to play at this pace all the time, they look very comfortable playing at this pace. I don't think they minded it. I don't think it's going to be an issue the way it was for the Knicks.
No, I mean, I don't think Boston is going to... They shouldn't ever be uncomfortable, right? I think they can play every way, and they're the more talented team, and they have mismatches. They're most of the time going to be the bigger team. Like, all this stuff should go in their direction. What's funny, though, is the Pacers actually had a better half-court offensive rating than Boston did. And that's been one of the funny things about Indiana all season, even back in the beginning of the year before Siakam and when they were just going crazy and playing even faster. There was this perception that they're like the 7 seconds or less Suns or some kind of anomaly where all their offense, all their scoring is just happening in the chaos of a fast break and whatnot. But they were the top half-court offense back then too. Their half-court offense was really great here. Some of that's just about like the seconds on the clock and this stuff's getting logged by
and they made a
computers at the end of the day.
They made a bunch of shots.
They made shots. And I think to me, like, one thing Boston did well that they do deserve credit for, like you said, they earned this, but they forced turnovers, 21 of them, as a defense that they don't go out of their way to try to do that all the time. They're not hounding the same way that maybe in Oklahoma City might be. And yet, they were able to get those and a lot of timely ones. The Pacers offense, though, like, this is one of the things that I feel like I'm appreciating about them more as the playoffs go along, Wes. And it's one of the coolest things to me that players in basketball can do and then sometimes teams can do, where they start as one thing. You kind of realize it's not going to be tenable. They morph, they adjust, they evolve. And then they kind of circle back to what they were in the beginning. And I honestly think we're pretty close to what the Pacers' identity was back during the NBA Cup days and everything else, when they were just all offense, the mindset fully on, generating the first good shot they can and taking it. I think the evolution, though, has come in. They have Siakam. They're emboldening guys like Nembhard and Nesmith, even TJ McConnell, where maybe they weren't before. And they just take these shots in little windows that I honestly do think, like, I could see the Celtics getting used to it. I could see this being, again, the game they really had to steal, because they do have this odd pace. They'll take like a quick little pull-up two or a quick little bunny or floater in a space where, especially in the NBA these days, like, you just don't see teams take them. So I think that has a lot to do with how their half-court offense stays afloat. And again, I could see Boston getting used to it, but it really worked tonight. Nembhard, those 2 pull-up jumpers you mentioned late against Horford.
Those were the ones.
All these little moments.
That when you were talking about that, even before you brought up the Nembhard thing, those are the 2 shots that I was thinking about in the second half. And right, weird little pockets on the court, 18, 19 feet out, just above the elbow. Like, nobody shoots from there. You're not supposed to.
Yeah.
That's a bad shot. But the Pacers that is typically a bad shot. But the Pacers are very well coached, and you can tell. And Nembhard does not take that shot if it's Drew Holiday or Jaylen Brown or Jayson Tatum in front of him. But they scouted Al Horford, and they said, if you get him, and they hunted those shots. They hunted them out. That wasn't just like half court, nobody touched the ball. I've just got this shot 18 feet away from the basket. I'm shooting it because I'm feeling lucky today. No, they hunted out the Horford switch, and they said, hey, as soon as you get it, Boston is so quick about pre-switching and switching back and kind of getting guys back and crowding you. As soon as you get the matchup you want, just shoot it. We don't care where you are on the court. Just shoot it because this is the number 2 defense in the league. And those windows aren't open for very long. And so I thought they were the better coach team today. I thought their game plan was way better than Boston's. It just felt like the Celtics, and by the way, it should have been. The Celtics they had the high ground. They come in, they play their game, and they say, how do we adjust, and let's see if we can play the Pacers' pace, and we'll go from there. The Pacers were the team climbing uphill. They're the team that needed to say, okay, here are the pressure points that we want to pick at. Here's the kind of spots on the margins where we think we have the advantage. And they made a bunch of tough shots in this game, and they kept it close, and they almost stole this one. And that's why it's got to be so disheartening for the Pacers, is because, look, I do think that there's some good things to take away from this game if you're Indiana. This wasn't just a lucky kind of go into game one and catch the Celtics a little cold here. I think, first of all, the Celtics don't have an answer for Miles Turner when Miles Turner is playing like that. Point blank. Kristaps Porzingis isn't coming back until game 4, maybe, according to Woj. So
yeah,
Al Horford is. I know we all love Al Horford, and the NBA media world loves Al Horford, and you're not allowed to say anything bad about Al Horford. But Al Horford's washed, dude. Like, it's done.
He's old. He's playing like 40 minutes a night, and he's like 40 years old. Those numbers shouldn't be the same.
Right. He's supposed to be washed, and washed he is. The Pacers were not scared of Horford when Horford had the ball. The big part of their defensive scheme was, yeah, dude, go ahead and shoot it from out there. We're not going to close out. Horford went 3 for 12 from three-point range tonight, and felt like it.
They have their closeouts or lack thereof are like disrespectful.
So
they tease. They'll do one step and then go like, never mind. It's mind games. It's not just laying off.
There was literally one where Siakam sees the ball go over his head, and the instinct there is, ball goes over my head, let me turn around and close out on whoever that is. Turns around, sees that as Horford, or has already taken a step and a half, and then goes, oh, never mind, and then gets repositioned for the offensive rebound that he ended up getting. So it was very disrespectful. It was Tony Allen-esque. But look, it was they're not afraid of him, and they shouldn't be afraid of him. And there's going to be a game in the series where he goes off, and they should stick to the game plan. It's fine. But and then defensively, they were hunting him with. I mean, it's one thing to hunt him with Miles Turner and Pascal Siakam and Tyrese Halliburton. It's another thing to hunt him with Andrew Nembhard, dude. And I like Nembhard as much as the next guy, but come on. So that's what they were doing, and I think there's a couple of things that you could feel good about, but I would start there from the Pacers is, hey, we've got the center matchup. Cornette is unplayable in this series. That's not going to work. And Al Horford's borderline unplayable, and they're not going to get Kristaps Porzingis back for at least 3 more games.
And I'm not even sure if Kristaps Porzingis solves everything we're talking about. I think he helps their rim protection. Yep. You know, the Pacers were able to get to the basket. Some of their and shooting wise, you definitely have to close out on him in a way that you're not able to pack the paint quite as much. But the defensive, the ways that they were manipulating Horford in space and on switches and everything else, you know, there were a lot of people, the video clipper people on Twitter were pointing out just the real only role. Did you like just a group?
I do like that. I'm gonna make that a list of people on
yeah, great.
The video clipper people.
They were pointing out like Horford, his only real role defensively in this series is just guarding Siakam one-on-one. Like he can do that. Anything else, not so much. And I think that's another thing the Pacers can feel good about is whether it's Horford or anybody else, the quickness with which Halliburton and Siakam have been able to develop chemistry in a 2-man game is crazy to me. It's just clicking. And they've been teammates for 3 months, you know, maybe 4. I guess they made that trade a little early. Halliburton's already had that with Miles Turner dating back to last year. And they set, it's all about the angles, it feels like, with those guys. I think that's part of why Halliburton's able to get his pull-up three off even when everybody knows it's coming. He takes these wide angles coming off of screens so that he stretches, they're not really able to trap or hedge against him. He's going to stretch to how far his defender has to recover. It's like, okay, you're going over the screen to take my pull-up three away, but that doesn't mean the same thing it means with like Damian Lillard or Trae Young, who's kind of just going straight down. You're going to have to get out to me, and I have long strides and I'm tall. And then meanwhile, that creates that much more space for Siakam or Turner to go downhill. It's really cool. And any of those three guys, whoever's screening for Halliburton, it's clicking at a really high level right now.
It essentially operates as a two-man triangle, exactly what you're talking about, right? Because Halliburton is 6'6" or whatever he is, and has that jump pass, and he can get those long arms over the top. And so, the triangle, usually you get that switch to your post player. Post player is on a small down low, and you kind of do that one pass to the side, that guy quick post entry, and then you take advantage of the mismatch. But with Halliburton, because he takes those wide angles and because he's tall, unlike Steph and Dame and these other guys, he's not looking for the shot there. He's really looking for the pass, right? If they're going to come up and trap against him, or even show even a little bit and just give him a little bit of a window, that jump pass is there real quick, and it essentially operates, because of the angles that you're talking about, as sort of a triangle offense. And they went to that early, and I thought that was so smart by the Pacers. Is, oh, Peyton Pritchard's in the game? Bet. Oh, like Hauser's in the game? Let's go. And they press the buttons at the right time, and that's whether it's Nembhard finding Horford on two straight jumpers in the third quarter or fourth quarter, whenever that was, and then kind of going to those Halliburton post-ups against Boston's bench. Like, they find these pressure points, and they push the button until they can't push it anymore. And it's just really, really smart basketball by the Pacers.
Everybody can drive. Everybody's emboldened, like I said, to take those little awkward shots. I didn't even mention Obi Toppin. I think the mentality, and Rob Mahoney wrote about this at The Ringer at the beginning of the season, the way that Halliburton, I think his mentality and his looseness and his unselfishness, you really do see it rub off. I think it matters that he is the way he is, that those guys in a big game like this even have the confidence to want the ball, let alone take shots like that.
It's going to be on Halliburton and Carlisle, obviously, to get them ready for Game 2 after what was a really disappointing Game 1. For a young team, they looked a little shook in overtime after fumbling the game away after the end of regulation, and they got to get it right. They still had a chance in overtime, and they still let that chance slip through their hands. They got to get right, and it's not going to be easy for this team to do.
They can make this a series. I think tonight proved that. I had the feeling... Okay, feel-out game. If the Pacers had won, my mind was going is this Game 1 and then the Celtics just take control? I lean no on that. I don't think this was a feel-out game. I think on Boston's side, this was a fuck-around-and-find-out game. And they got saved a little bit. I do think the weirdness with the challenges and the fouls kind of balanced out. Siakam has a loose ball foul where somehow he's the guy getting grabbed, but then I do think Brown might have fouled Siakam on the inbounds pass, and then Siakam probably fouled him on the corner three in that next play right after that. So I think it all is a wash. Yeah. This was close, and
another
the Pacers
big play
have
on
a
the
chance.
foul front there. Neesmith fouling out, trying to chase down Jayson Tatum after a turnover. I like the effort there, but if you've got 5 fouls, it's almost a little bit more of a time and place thing. He fouls out. He's Tatum's primary defender. So then they put Nembhard on him because they don't have another option, really. And Tatum gets fouled by Nembhard on the next possession because Neesmith's not in, and Nembhard's just giving up so much size there. He's basically just pulling on his jersey, just trying to stop him. So, and that was a big play in overtime. And then the other
Neesmith's
thing, too, here was...
you got to channel it the right way, but you can't foul out, especially in a close game.
Again, love the effort, but you can't do it. I get maybe if it's overtime, you're like, screw it, it balls to the wall, we got nothing left to lose. I can see it on both ways there. The other thing too is I felt like going into this series, we were talking not we, but we as in the national media talking up the Pacers defense quite a bit to the point where it was kind of faking it. Like, oh, they were really bad in the regular season, but they've really shown a lot more effort in the playoffs. They were giving up more points per 100 possessions in the playoffs than they were in the regular season. Let's just relax, okay? So it wasn't so quite so like, hey, the Pacers defense is formidable. It was kind of just
better than it was in November, but let's not pretend like this game was close because Boston's defense wasn't executing. That's
right,
really going to be the
right?
difference.
Then,
can they or can't they?
And then Boston was still the team that made the two biggest defensive plays of the game. You had the Derek White, or maybe not the biggest. That's not maybe not, but the most memorable ones, the flashbulb ones. Derek White breaking up a pass from behind from Miles Turner to Obi Toppin on the lob. Just an incredible. It was the best defensive play of the game. And then, of course, late, you've got Drew Holiday hounding Halliburton and forcing that out-of-bounds turnover.
I will say Halliburton blocking White was a pretty damn good defensive play, too. That one could have been the turning point. You know, all these little ones all add up. But, yeah, I think we're in agreement. Indiana is going to be competitive here. I don't think this was just those, the Magic beating the Raptors in Game 1 the year that the Kawhi Raptors won the championship. I don't think that's what this was. I think this is going to be much more competitive than that. Let's get on to some off-season look-aheads as the Knicks, the Nuggets, and the Thunder said goodbye to their postseason chances here, Wes. First, Homage, an ultra-comfortable specialty apparel company with NBA and WNBA licenses that uses vintage-inspired designs to pay homage to the greatest stories, traditions, and figures across sports, music, and pop culture. We love Homage. Wes was not around when we got our Homage packages, but I'm sporting my Grand Canyon t-shirt. It's a little more summery. I think the other two I have are black, so this one got busted out recently, and they're soft. They look cool. They always have great designs. Of course, the sports stuff is nice. They have licenses to all the real deal teams and leagues, but they have WWE stuff. They have National Park. They have pop culture, all sorts of Grateful Dead, tons of Grateful Dead stuff. Check it out. Father's Day coming up. Maybe you are a type who gives 4th of July gifts. I don't know. Use the link below. Make your purchase. 4th of July. Is that a thing? No, it's not. Okay. I was going month by month. That's the next holiday. Just felt right. I do know a girl, and I always used to tell this story when I was younger, who, when I was like in 4th grade, first of all, she got a cell phone when we were in 4th grade. And this was like before that was, maybe it's a little more normal now. This was like flip phone, slide phone era. And she got that gift for Thanksgiving. That always blew my mind as a child. Like, I didn't know we were doing that. Didn't know we were giving out phones for Thanksgiving.
Good for them.
Great for them. I guess
the rich get richer.
They're rolling in it. Yeah, nice. All right, Denver's offseason, Wes.
Let's do it.
To me, I just want to preface all of the possibilities we're going to run through here in a little look ahead by saying I still believe in this team and I still believe in this starting five. And if I'm Calvin Booth, I'm going into the offseason and I'm not panicking. I'm not overreacting. And I'm spending what it takes to keep the group together as priority number one. Now, other opportunities can come along. Their hand could be forced with one member of that starting five who we will get to right away. But they lost to a team that was healthier, more confident, and deeper than them. Shit happens. That's kind of my top line view of where Denver's at right now. I don't think this is an emergency situation.
Yeah, I'm glad we agree on this. Calvin Booth, before the season, telling Kevin O'Connor from The Ringer in a feature that he wrote that, hey, you know, if we don't go back-to-back, it's not the end of the world. We're looking to win multiple championships over this half-decade plus kind of thing, and if we never win back-to-back, the way the Spurs never won back-to-back, that's okay. Like, we still think we can establish a dynasty in that way, and you heard even Michael Malone reflect those same things in his post-game press conference after their Game 7 loss to Minnesota. So everything's going as planned, essentially. Like, you didn't plan to win back-to-back, and guess what? You didn't. So good for you, I guess. But I'm with you also. Look, most people are going to say, well, Denver lost because they didn't have depth, and Minnesota did. And that's partially true, but it's not as true as some people are making it out to be. At the end of the day, your starting five needed to be better. And Denver's starting five, which has been the best starting five in basketball for a couple of years now, was not that in the playoffs and certainly wasn't that against the Timberwolves. And if your starting five is just better, which at the end of the day, that's what wins you championships, right? Like Bruce Brown, Jeff Green are great. The starting five is what wins you a championship. And so if your starting five is better, then you're better. And it was still a 7-game series. And they still led 20 in Game 7. It's not.
And it still took a Naz Reid explosion in the final 2 minutes to turn that game. Exactly. It's not even like it was some kind of blowout. You were up 20, you were up 11 at half. But
that said, I think there's still team needs. I think that there's if you it would also be a little bit malpractice to just run it back and not make some tweaks on the fringes. Like, you should probably do something after losing in the second round, especially when it feels like the league has caught up to you a little bit here. So you've got to do something to move the needle. But you mentioned Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, or alluded to him. Yeah. He's probably going to opt out of a $15 million contract, even though we don't know that for certain. But if he does opt out, that's basically priority number one for Denver, is trying to bring him back, I would imagine.
Yeah, he is $15.4 million. I think there will be a market for him bigger than that. Philly's the obvious one, but he fits everywhere. I mean, he's the quintessential kind of 3-and-D smaller wing guy that you can slot in anywhere. He shot 33% from deep in the playoffs, 37% somehow in that Minnesota series, which feels like a misprint, but somehow it's true. It just felt like that weapon, and he would be such a big part of their biggest runs. He's great at the, sprint and stop, catch and shoot threes in transition when they would really get rolling last year. When he's making those shots, he has his own two-man chemistry as a screener and a dribble handoff option with Jokic. It just felt like that was stamped out, even though apparently, I guess, again, he shot 37% against Minnesota. So him being better and sticking around, like that literally could be the difference between us feeling better in May of next year about him. That said, they're not that far from the tax. I mean, that the second apron, I should say, which is, I think, going to be the restraint they have, and something, again, that could force their hand if they have to match an offer for KCP that's a substantial raise on what he has now. Do they have to get rid of other players, and what kind of position does that put them in, and are they getting worse just to keep him? I think that's why that first domino is going to be so big. But if we just assume they're able to keep him without sacrificing the best young guys they have, Wes, what do you feel like is the main place they do need to upgrade to get better, get deeper, get in a better position to win that second championship?
Yeah, I don't think it's crazy. You need to figure out what you're going to get with backup center. Can you convince some sort of veteran to come take the minimum and be willing to come off the bench for Jokic for 15 minutes a game in the regular season and maybe 4 or 5 minutes a game in the postseason until you just don't anymore? And that's the tough spot, right? Like, I don't know how many veteran centers are signing up for that unless they want to, chase a ring. And in that case, hey, really great kind of carved out role for you. But they need to figure that out. And there's a bunch, there's always minimum guy centers out there, and they've tried the DeAndre Jordans and things like that, but they gotta find an answer to that problem. And the other thing too is I think they need to go find some wing stopper. Sounds like that's not going to happen at the minimum. That's essentially what they got with Holiday this year, is sort of a wing-ish, stopper-ish kind of guy. But maybe find another one of those guys, who can give you another option there. But I also don't know that you want to completely veer off course here. You've got Peyton Watson, you got Christian Brown, you got a couple of young guys. Like, these are ostensibly the guys who are going to have to step up for KCP if you do lose him in free agency, which would really put you behind the 8 ball there. But if the idea was, we're not going to sign veterans going into this year because we want these guys to develop, then I think you do stick to that plan and you still try to elevate those guys and develop internally, because that's been the plan all along. And so I think that's what you have to do, unless you make a more dramatic change in terms of a trade with one of those high-priced guys. Then you can kind of rejigger the rotation, the whole thing a little bit more. But for now, I think you basically just do the same thing and just hope that instead of DeAndre Jordan, whoever you get this time hits. And instead of, a Holiday, whoever you get this time hits a little bit more, It's
just hard because the reputation Malone had for not playing young guys, it felt like maybe we had moved past that when he slots Christian Brown into the playoff rotation last year, and it works. And then this year, it kind of reverts right back. This is the guy once upon a time who got fired from the Kings when he was like above 500, because he just has this clash of vision with the front office, with ownership, with whatever. Now, Sacramento, I'm not going to give them the benefit of the doubt the same way that I would Denver, but he has to figure out which of these guys he can trust, because at the end of the day, you can find backup centers, and they do need that because they don't even have a young guy option there. I think we know now Zeke Naji, it's just not going to happen. Right. Whereas those other positions they do. But getting rid of those guys to go chase some minimum signing on the open market, the upside of that is lower. You got to figure out, can Hunter Tyson, who we barely saw, can Jalen Pickett, who we barely saw, can these other guys take a step forward? He just stopped playing Peyton Watson in the playoffs. When you get to a game 7, it's understandable, but to not even ever try it in this Minnesota series for any extended stretch, it's just like, you can't really be doing that, because those are your guys, for better or worse. You don't have other options here. So, but we're on exactly the same page. Backup big is huge. Jokic off the court in the playoffs. 2 stats fell off a cliff: offensive rebounding and defensive foul rate. So those both go to, they didn't have the size and the defensive kind of backbone that they needed. And I think truly facing Minnesota, a big team, if you think back to what their second unit was last year when they didn't have Jokic on the court, obviously Gordon was still their center. They had Green as another kind of bigger dude, but really what kept them afloat was having both Browns out there. Murray would be out there, Gordon would be out there, and Green would be out there, and they would just switch everything.
Yeah.
You can't really do that against Minnesota, and there's going to be more teams like that. I don't think if they had played Dallas, that would have really worked. And so maybe that was a one-season trick, and you have to be a little more traditional, and the league is actually changing back to what you are, but you only have one of the guys in Jokic that gives you that identity. You have to have it across 48 minutes. So that's luckily not the hardest thing to find, but there will be a demand there. Like, the Suns need that. I know plenty of teams every summer are hunting for those guys. But you mentioned big trades here, and I think what people are thinking about, if they were to do something big, if the salary situation forced them to, is Michael Porter Jr. I will say, Wes, I think Porter Jr. is overpaid in a vacuum. I think this idea of where he could go, you're not getting untapped potential for MPJ. I don't think it's there. I think he is what he is.
Yep.
But at the same time, I do think he could be more valuable elsewhere, if that makes sense. Where what he does, just being a volume shooter, if that's all you're getting, and a vet and a positional defender, some younger building teams maybe could see that as worth something in a way that Denver could afford to take a step back in, if that makes sense. Like, I thought of Detroit. I think you have some ideas as well. Like Marcus Sasser, who was kind of a fun little 6-man scoring guy for the Pistons this year, and like Isaiah Stewart. Could you just turn them into 2 pieces who maybe fit with what you want to be and provide some depth in different areas, and the Pistons could say, hey, yeah, it's not maybe worth $26 million or $30 million or whatever, but what are we going to spend our money on? Tobias Harris? Yeah, let him space the floor for Cade, and we'll see how that goes. So I would be looking for a team like that. I think there could be a trade out there, but again, I'm not trying to do it if I'm the Nuggets.
Michael Porter Jr. is a good player. He's not worth $35 million. And in this new CBA with a second tax apron and the limitations with it, which was not the CBA that this team was built under, you might have to make some changes. It's really hard to afford what you might have. Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, who's going to be up for an extension soon, Michael Porter Jr. at $35 million, and if you want to bring back KCP at whatever he's going to be making, $20 million a year, whatever we think it's going to end up being market value-wise. And I do think that Michael Porter Jr. is the harder player in a vacuum to find, but KCP is more important to Denver, and especially if you're getting him at $15 million less annually than what MPJ is worth, because that's the other part too, is there's a cost-benefit analysis to this, and I don't think that Michael Porter Jr. has been worth $35 million to Denver, and when they signed him to that, they probably did think he had a little bit higher a ceiling than what it turned out that he has. And by the way, quietly, not a very good playoff performer, and that's what it's all about for Denver.
Just a very dependent player, right? So teams can turn off the faucet.
Can you move him and his $35 million and turn that into 2 or 3 players who, and maybe even save you a little bit of money that frees up some of this cap space to go make some other moves? And I think there's something to be said about being better for it. And then to your point too, You're no longer the hunted. You're the hunter. And those two teams that you talked about that you could have matchup problems against, Dallas and Minnesota, those are the teams in the Western Conference Finals. Those are the teams that if you're Denver, you have to hunt. So you have to approach this offseason a little bit different and saying, like, what do we need to beat these teams? Because these teams got further than we did. And one of them beat us head-to-head. So I like the Detroit idea. I like the idea of going and getting a guy like Isaiah Stewart. Like, that to me does make sense. It's sort of funny. We thought, like, early in the Denver build, they had to split up Nurkic and Jokic because the two centers didn't work. Well, now Jokic is a completely different player than at that point than he was, obviously. He has a three-point shot. You could play him next to another center, and it could feasibly work. I don't know that I would go to that full time because then there's spacing issues between Jokic, another center, and Aaron Gordon. But I would at least like to have the optionality. And I don't know that just finding a guy on the minimum gives you that optionality, right? Like, it's one thing to go get Andre Drummond, but you don't want him playing next to Jokic necessarily. So I have 3
And Jokic said that, right, about Minnesota. He said they can be big or small, and that really challenged us. So he's speaking truth to all of this as well. I think that lack of versatility really hurt them.
I've got 3 trade ideas. 2 of them to young teams, like you mentioned. 1 of them to a not young team. Cool. All right, so Michael Porter Jr. to Orlando for Jalen Suggs and Joe Ingles. I kind of love the idea of Suggs in Denver. Ingles would be
Suggs
a nice
in Denver would be great. I think you could make the case Suggs is more valuable already. That's the problem.
I think so. That was kind of where I landed on it, but MPJ in Orlando makes a lot of sense also. Like, that kind of is exactly what, if they would be willing to move off of Jalen
them huge
Suggs,
while also
providing
adding
spacing
shooting
that they need. At least call them about it. Memphis for Marcus Smart, Conchar, and Gigi Jackson. Kind of get 3 rotation pieces.
Gigi Jackson, he would just become an all-star with the Nuggets, and we would all rip our hair out. I love MPJ in Memphis. That's a really good fit. I think that's awesome. They've needed any kind of volume shooter, and then of course they get it in Desmond Bane. Then he has to play a whole season on the ball because Ja gets hurt. So one more guy to space who's, again, I feel like his defense is you can survive it, and especially if you're not having to have a defense that plays the way that Denver's does with Jokic always stretched out and MPJ having to be the low man. He could just kind of take up space. I think you could do a lot worse.
This is gonna sound like almost a diss, but like MPJ is really good at waving his arms around. Like
he's good at being 6'10",
yeah,
right?
Exactly. Like, he waves his arms like a butterfly, and you're just like, that's what we need you to do. That's great. I like the idea of also having somebody like Marcus Smart in Denver. Yeah, it's a similar thing to Jalen Suggs where you can kind of go big and you can go small, right? Like Marcus Smart or Jalen Suggs, either one of them can play next to Jamal Murray and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. You can go a little bit smaller if you wanted to in those alignments as well.
Bruce Brown, right? Same thing.
Exactly. My final one, Michael Porter Jr. to the New York Knicks for Bojan Bogdanovic and Mitchell Robinson.
Ooh, I do like the Mitchell Robinson concept, even though he would inevitably miss some time, but that's a good one. MPJ Tibbs guy?
Nope. But Tibbs doesn't call the shots there.
There's the hang-up. True.
Neither is Bogdanovic, evidently, so it doesn't matter.
We'll see how Tibbs' contract extension talks go, which is a great transition over the Knicks. I have one last thought before we get there, though, which is if Christian Braun can demonstrate that his three-point shooting progress from the first regular season he was in the NBA till this past one is real and not fall off a cliff as a shooter in the postseason each year, a lot of this stuff changes because he could be a KCP replacement. He could even be part of a replacement option for MPJ if he can make shots, but he shot 22% last year in the playoffs, 20% this year. That's not going to be good enough when you're sharing the court with Gordon and Jokic and everything else. Obviously, the Peyton Watson offensive development would be massive too, but just got to be about who they trust and what else they can do. All right, let's go to the Knicks. Fred Katz over at The Athletic West reported the organization is still targeting the upcoming summer as the time to trade for the next big name. Julius Randle, can become a free agent in 2025 and will be due for a raise then. Will he? Are we sure he will be? As can Brunson, who is eligible for an extension this summer that could make more money by waiting until 2025 to sign a new contract instead of an extension, as most guys of his caliber often can. So, to me with New York, it's tough. It really is when you work yourself into this point in team building, I think, Wes, because you're too good already. It feels so you can get, no pun intended, a little bit precious about, well, this group got us here. We're going to take something away from this? And so when you talk about trades, it quickly becomes, okay, Mitchell Robinson, that could be an outgoing salary based on how well Hartenstein and Achua played. All right, we would probably be moving Julius Randle. Do other teams want either of those players? Do those salaries line up? Beyond that, there's not a lot of other stuff. They traded a lot of it to get OG, to get Bogdanovich and Burks. So I'm kind of in the it's easier said than done space with the Knicks before we even get to the targets, not to mention the fact that if they do re-sign Hartenstein, Achua, and Anunoby, who we think they probably will want to re-sign, they're going to be in the tax. So this is getting difficult from a lot of different angles to improve from, okay, 2 second-round exits to how do we win a championship?
Yeah, and not to just gloss over the OG Anunoby thing, because that's priority number one. You got to go re-sign that guy. And there's going to be teams, Philadelphia, Orlando, Oklahoma City, I'm guessing, that are going to say, you know what, we're going to max you out. We've got max offers to you, just so you know. The Knicks are going to have to at least match that and say, we got you, and we're going to take care of you going forward. And, him having to play so many minutes under Tibbs, Anunoby with his injury history might not be thrilled about that. If there's another team offering a little bit more of a maintenance program for him, who knows what can happen. So that's not – the Knicks, I'm sure, feel pretty good about it. It's why they traded for him. But also, you never know what's going to happen. He's a free agent. He can do whatever he wants. So there's that.
Yep.
The other part of it, too, and I'm with you on the Knicks. I think what we've learned over the last couple of years is once you have your star player, everything kind of you got to build around it, around that player, and what fits with that player. And more specifically, and more importantly, don't add players who take away from what your best player does well or limits that best player. And so they have Jalen Brunson. You need to find his co-star. Is it Julius Randle? Because Julius Randle on paper makes a lot of sense as a co-star next to Jalen Brunson, but Randle's got his own things, and he's going to be a free agent, and he's not necessarily the most consistent guy, and it's sort of a year on and a year off for him.
Yeah, has a player option next summer, which we'll see. I don't know what he would do. $32.4 million. Like I said, I'm not even trying to be disrespectful when I say, is he really due a raise? But multiple years now with pretty significant injuries, and I know the cap's going up and all that stuff, but he has his own decisions to make.
You want to re-sign Hartenstein. You want to bring back Precious Achua, probably, who's a restricted free agent. You've got all this stuff happening. I don't know. So now I'm at the targets, and I keep hearing that the Knicks are going to be shopping, and this is the summer where they want to make a big move. And I'm like, for who? Who's the guy? Karl-Anthony Towns, now that the Timberwolves are in the Western Conference Finals, I don't think that the Timberwolves are breaking this thing up.
I would target him if he's available, but it'd be pretty hard pressed to trade your second best player if you go to the finals or even where they are now.
And with all this stuff happening with Glenn Taylor right now, it sounds like they're willing to put the money down for this team.
And if they're getting rid of him, they don't want Julius Randle, right? That's part of the problem with the Knicks is Randle's almost always having to go to a third team with a lot of these moves.
That's a good point. Yeah, the Knicks do have a bunch of their draft picks and a bunch of incoming picks from other teams that they're able to move, but they got rid of Emmanuel quickly. They got rid of a lot of their young RJ Barrett, their young players that could otherwise be used as blue chips in these trade concepts. So I don't know. The Joel Embiid thing, I don't think Knicks fans even are going to allow him into Madison Square Garden with the way they treated him in the second round. So and by the way, also no indication that he's going to get moved. So I don't know.
Same
I
with
don't know
Giannis.
who the guy is. I don't know who the guy is. Donovan Mitchell makes zero sense for that team. I know that Knicks fans have been clamoring over Devin Booker. Again, I would be shocked if Devin Booker was traded this summer. I don't see that happening. I just don't know who the guy is. And so we could talk the talk.
For what it's worth with Booker, Stephen A. Smith tried to make that happen locally. That was stamped out. I think the GM said they're not trading any of the big three, so say goodbye to Durant. I don't think LeBron makes really much of a dent in this whole thing, even if you dream up that LeBron would go to New York. So It gets thin pretty quick. Jimmy Butler?
They want size. Jimmy Butler makes sense, but Pat Riley would roll over in his grave. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah,
there's no way he's doing that. He'll fax something over saying no thanks. We reject your trade proposal. If they want to get a bigger body, which I think it seems to be the reported thing that they want, and if they're not looking for another guard, which again they shouldn't because they have it in Brunson. Like Jarrett Allen, I don't know that makes a whole lot of sense. I'd rather just re-sign Hartenstein. Do you call them about Evan Mobley? Like, I don't know that the Cavs are ready to move off of that. I just don't know.
Yeah, I
who
mean,
the guy
you
is.
right. You call about all the
Right.
call about the big fish, and you see if something unexpected happens. Sign and trade with Paul George. Does that make a huge impact? I don't know. What's going on in Golden State. Just let me get on the phone here. Brandon Ingram. That's one of the only guys we think could be available who we haven't said the name of. Not really like obsessed with that, but it makes them a little bigger. It would, as a replacement for Randall, okay. Like I guess I can kind of see how it could work. But yeah,
call the Warriors
not
about Draymond.
I mean, I was thinking Steph, but Draymond, sure. They're not trading Steph, but we were just, you just start
They're
shaking
not trading
trees.
Draymond either, for what it's worth. But yeah,
no. So Bill Simmons has been saying Mikal Bridges for a while, and obviously like the Villanova thing is gonna make that a popular idea. I don't know what Brooklyn's doing and what their summer will look like, so it's really hard to say what they would or wouldn't take back. They have picks galore already. I have no real idea. He fits great. Another wing who can create his own shot. I like that. But again, even without the trade part of this, who's going to the bench?
right.
It's going to be a weird
I think the Knicks
weird
need to
summer.
Relax. I know that they keep signaling that they want to make a move, and they should definitely explore all the trades and all this stuff. But if it doesn't happen, I think it's going to be fine. And then you figure out, okay, what's the next Dante DiVincenzo? What's our next Josh Hart? And I think that trade like that could be very beneficial. They just need to flesh out the bench. They need to figure out what they are, who's healthy, who do we got coming back, and what do we want our playoff rotation, if it's healthy, to be next year. And do we think Julius Randle is a big part of this? And if he's not, then is there maybe a move to do something with that on that front? And if there is, if there isn't, there's no the deadline isn't by the end of the summer to make that happen either. So I don't think that this team needs to rush. And that's really all I got on the Knicks.
Sure. We can go to OKC to close out the show. If staying deep, keeping this group together is not the dumbest thing I can think of when you have injury-prone players, And, yes, Tibbs probably did run some of these guys into the ground, and you're going to need to be careful with Anunoby and everything, but Randall and Mitchell Robinson, at the very least, are two guys you need to manage. So having all these other options is a nice benefit. All right, let's go to OKC. So I'm kind of a similar mind. I mean, we're to the third round. It shouldn't come as a huge surprise that we're saying, relatively speaking, kind of stand pat unless a great opportunity arises. But I do think the parity moment we're in, just the same way you can say stand pat and see what happens, you can also say, hey, take a big swing. And Oklahoma City has the assets to do that in a way not a lot of other teams do. They have the 12th overall pick this year. They have any number of interesting young players that they could make available if they wanted to. And of course, they have the Josh Giddey thing kind of looming after he got benched in the second round against Dallas West. To me, priority number one, obviously there's the get bigger thing. I think there's more ways to do that, but they need to figure out what their next options are on offense if Shea driving into traffic and making something happen doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, we could start with the Josh Giddey part of it. We could start with the $33 million in cap space and how they want to utilize that. I'll say this. We all agree that Sam Presti's a great general manager, although I think that the praise is a little bit heavy-handed. It's cool, you got a bunch of draft picks and you hit on a third of them, congrats. And your best player you got in a trade. But whatever. If there's a knock against Presti, it's that he's not been very good at this part. He didn't do this in the 2012 after the Thunder went to the finals. He kept banking on young players to flesh out the rest of the bench, where he probably should have been going for veterans, and he didn't. And the Thunder never got back to the finals. So, and there's a lot of things that went on there, but Presti did not help. He has a second chance now. All right, it's cool. The young players and the draft picks, and I've got 14 of the next first round picks in the next whatever years. Sick, dude. Trade them.
Yeah,
trade them.
You literally already don't have roster spots for these players.
Right. We're done. Process accomplished. You were the number 1 seed in the West. Forget it. You're done.
You could have won the
Make
title
move.
this year.
Right.
Realistically, like that was on the table.
It was on the table, and I don't blame him for being patient. I know that's not what you're saying, and I don't blame him for being patient at this deadline. Go to the playoffs, figure out, get the ultimate stress test, what you got, and figure out what you really need. And while I do think that rebounding and rim protection is a need, I don't know that it's as big of a need as some people are making it out to be. They were 27th in defensive rebounding rate this year. That's not good. They got crushed on the glass by Dallas. It's why they lost that series. You don't need to be elite. You don't need to spend your $33 million in cap space at that and fundamentally change who you are. You just can't be 27th. Can you give me 18th? Because that's a huge difference, right?
Yeah.
And so that to me is what I would be thinking if I was Oklahoma City. And there was a big moment late in that game, in Game 7 against Dallas, where they tried Jalen Williams with the Y with Chet Holmgren in the front court. And a lot of people kind of read that as like, well, this is what they really want to be. And I didn't read it as that. I just said this is matchup specific, and they had no other options, and they were sucking, and they needed to try to find a fix. But I do think they want that optionality, which they don't really
I don't think
have.
it's what they want to be, but it's what they want to have.
It's what they want to have.
Yeah.
I don't think that this is going to be a team that's starting 2 bigs going forward, because I think that takes them out of what makes them great. But to have that little optionality, and then to your point, to have another guy who basically does everything Josh Giddey does but also make threes, would be my 2 targets. And however I can get to there, whether it's trading Giddey, using this $33 million in cap space on a free agent or in a trade by absorbing a contract, that's sort of what I'm looking for, is a better version of Jalen Williams and a better version of Josh Giddey who can shoot.
All right, so just in terms of places he could go that he fits that have roughly some stuff to trade for him, I had 3 places for Giddey. And then I have some targets for the Thunder that are kind of separate from that. I almost feel like it's going to have to be 2 different things because Giddey doesn't make a lot of money. So I had Charlotte, Utah, and Golden State as places that I could see Giddey kind of getting a different kind of role, more opportunity, and little less pressure, and developing beyond what he is right now. Charlotte, it's like they have LaMelo. They kind of play up and down in space. He could thrive there. Utah, they're just shapeless, so he's going to get reps. And then the Warriors, like stylistically, you could see some ways where as a dribble handoff guy, as kind of a short roll guy, he could play more like a big and maybe have an impact. So those were my 3. How optimistic are you Giddey can be something? Like, does he have value?
I think Giddey's a really good player, and I think if I'm a team looking to add talent, the guy's a 6th pick in the draft. He's 6'7". He's a good rebounder, a very good passer, pushes the pace. Like, if you're looking to infuse that kind of stuff into your team, he's a great buy low option right now. He's just obviously not a fit for OKC, but I think he could be a good fit for a lot of teams. I like the teams you named. I would be a little surprised if the Warriors went in that direction just because of what their team needs are, and they just don't have a lot of stuff to move, but I think it's fine. I don't know that I have a team like specifically marked out, but I like the Jazz a lot for him, actually. I think that's they're kind of a Thunder light in that they also prioritize the same things in terms of having a bunch of guys who can handle and move the ball and push the pace and just make basketball decisions with the ball in their hands.
And they've liked Chris Dunn, Talen Horton-Tucker. They've signed a lot of these bigger playmakers recently, so that was part of why it jumped to mind. But
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Like a team like the Hawks could make a little bit of sense if they're trying to sort of change the way that team plays. Like a guy who does sort of just kind of move the dials in different directions, like Giddey, like does make some sense for them, but not necessarily as their savior. But
he needs to get better if he can just improve as a scorer in the paint and maybe kind of foul drawer. I think he can be a rotation player in the league. It's just the fact that he's so inaccurate even when he gets to the basket that that's where he becomes a little unplayable, because you can make guys work if they're not amazing three-point shooters. Plenty of teams do, but if he can't score from anywhere, it's not going to work out.
Yeah, he does the quiet things really well, and he does the loud things really bad. And that's his biggest problem. It's like the guy clanks threes at best. Sometimes he's just airballing them. Defensively, you can get taken advantage of, but he's got great basketball feel. He pushes the pace. He's a good rebounder. He boxes out. Like, he's a smart basketball player. But there'll be a fit for him somewhere. And if I was a team with nothing to lose, not necessarily nothing to lose. That seems harsh. But if I were a team that's sort of on the up and up and rebuilding, I would definitely take a buy low swing at him. I've got some targets. You got some targets?
Yeah, I have 9.
I'm like right around there with you. Let me. I think I have 1 or 2 less than you. So I'm gonna name mine. You tell me if you also have that person.
Okay.
I've got Jared Allen as a target. Just felt like I had to put him on the list.
Sure. Yeah.
I probably wouldn't.
A little
I wouldn't go in
pricey
that
for
direction.
a backup.
Yeah. I wouldn't go in that direction. But same thing with Clint Capella. I had both of them on my list. It doesn't feel like that's what they should do. Kyle Kuzma.
Didn't have that. I like it. Fits really well with what they want to do, and
You can upsize, right? You could go Shea, Dort, Jalen Williams, new power forward like a Kuzma, and then Chet. You don't necessarily need to go with a guard upgrade the way that Giddey was. All right, so I got Kuzma, Jeremy Grant, who played for OKC for a couple of years. You had him too?
I did not have him.
Oh,
yeah, he's a good one.
He's okay. He's not he's a bad rebounder. I don't know if Oklahoma City could coax more out of that, but it feels like whoever they get needs to be able to help on the boards a little bit, but whatever.
Jeremy Grant has kind of been in like no man's land for a while now, and what he is when he gets back to a winning team is anybody's guess. He was on the Pistons and then the Blazers, and he had one season in there where they were trying to win it all, so who knows?
2 more Blazers, Malcolm Brogdon, Robert Williams III. I think those guys just make sense.
Robert Williams I had.
Okay. I said Kuzma. What about our old friend Steven Adams? That'd be a fun story.
Yeah, I'm not really sure why Houston added him, so
I don't know what the
Rockets. I don't really know what the Rockets are doing personally in a lot of different ways with the different players they add who don't seem to play the same style. So maybe you could pry him away, but yeah, I like it. I had Brandon Clark, similar, just buy low, kind of odd man out on a different team who could fill some of those big minutes for you.
I got one more for you, Tyler Hero. I kind of love it for them. Underrated rebounder, averages 5 to 6 boards a game over the last couple of years. Kind of is very similar to Giddey in that way. Mm-hmm. Good enough playmaker where he could be the secondary guy making plays, and just a knockdown 3-point shooter who would immediately be the best 3-point shooter on that team and improve the spacing. And he's a liability defensively, but yeah, I think there's enough defense on that team where you can cover up for him. And you wouldn't be forced to play him late in games. You'd have some other options potentially. So I don't know. The problem is getting up to that salary. Like, do they want to use all their cap space on Tyler Hero? Probably not, but maybe they do. Yeah. I don't know.
So this is cool. We didn't have a lot of overlap. I have Mikal Bridges here as well. It would be an interesting fit. He doesn't really like to drive. You know, he's a little contact averse with his style. So it would be a clash, but fits just, length and size and defense and ball handling. Andrew Wiggins, similar. Not exactly anybody's idea of,
Would you then get rid of Aaron Wiggins, or would you just go all in on these guys have very similar names type thing?
And not brothers, which is a real trick in there. Maybe honestly, Aaron Wiggins, maybe he's the answer. OKC fans love him. They seem to think he's coming.
Well, that
for
is the thing.
Here.
I think Kayson Wallace is sort of the answer in terms of just Giddey didn't work. Kayson Wallace is awesome. Let's just do that.
Yep.
And that's why I wouldn't necessarily overreact. But they also do have a lot of cap space that they kind of have to use. So this would be a time to just say, you know what? Let's make a pretty big swing. It doesn't have to be for a superstar. I actually would argue that it should not be for a superstar, but use that space smartly.
And at the end of the day, shit does just happen. That's why patience doesn't always work out. It's like you can spend another season thinking Wallace or this player or that player improves, but what if guys suddenly this guy doesn't get along with that guy and that guy wants money and this player's contract is up? It's why you got to just kind of make your moves. And if you ruffle some feathers or you say goodbye to Trey Mann to try to get Gordon Hayward, so be it. Whatever. C'est la vie at the end of the day. Rui Hachimura, I'm not saying he's available, but I like not an awesome rebounder either for his size, but if the Lakers make some moves and he becomes available, I like it. Harrison Barnes, old reliable, not exactly the sexiest move, but would make them bigger and fits how they play. Keldon Johnson, I don't really love. I haven't loved the winning potential of how Keldon Johnson has played basketball as a member of the Spurs, so I'm not fully sold on that one. Time Lord and Clark we talked about. And then I had two that were just like, can they steal a player who I really like from a different team by just bowling them over and taking advantage of them? Patrick Williams in Chicago. I still think that guy is really fun, crazy athlete, developing his offensive game.
Like
if he can take some more threes, that would be a really cool fit, but the Bulls would have to be dumb to do that. Guess what? They are kind of dumb sometimes, so maybe it happens. And then Jaden Ivey from the Pistons. I think anything's on the table for Detroit. Ivy's not exactly, kind of like Hero's not like super what they, top of the list need. Ivy would be a cool
maybe Isaiah
trial.
Stewart for them too.
Sure.
It makes a little bit of sense. The thing is with the Thunder, you might be able to go beyond the normal list of names because they have so many draft picks at their disposal that if they put them on the table, they have access to players that other teams don't have access to. Like, what would the Nets say if if Oklahoma City said, "Here's 10 first-round picks"? Like, I'm not saying they should do it, but they can do it.
Weren't they going to trade like 5 for Cade once upon a time? So I mean, they've thought about it. It's not just our imaginations.
And that's the sort of thing that I think they need to seriously explore this summer is just bowl over offer. Here's 10 first-round picks. I dare you to say no.
Well, the one name we didn't mention is Larry Markkinen, who I think it would take something like that to get because the Jazz are just in a position of strength. He seems comfortable there. God. They have the chance to pay him.
If they literally did 10 first-round picks, Danny Ainge would have to be talked out of it by somebody else in that Utah front office. And I'm not saying that he should be either. But Danny Ainge getting to write that press release or have that press release written of, I traded a player for 10 first-round picks, oh my God. It would be like the greatest trade ever for Danny Ainge.
So then he gets to turn around and almost trade those picks for another guy, which is his favorite thing to do. Almost.
Can I throw one more name at you?
Yeah.
Paul George.
The reunion.
Exactly what they need. They could have SGA and Paul George on the same team. If Paul George gets pissed at Ballmer for not getting him the contract that he wants, a part of him might be like, you know what? This would be the ultimate screws to put on this guy.
I think you have to disband the Clippers if that happens. I think like the amount of FU that would come out of reuniting both sides of that franchise shifting and ultimately like kind of a failure of a trade, playing together and finishing above you in the standings and maybe beating you in the playoffs, who knows? Like, that's peak Clippers, and I think it would just be too much. Like, just put a hockey team in the new arena or something. It's over.
Before we sign off here, I've got my list for you. Top 5 guys most likely to get traded this summer. Are you ready?
I do, and then I have one for you to get us ready for the West Finals on Wednesday.
All right, perfect. Let's do it. Top 5 guys. Number 5, Michael Porter Jr. Number 4, Julius Randle. Number 3, Donovan Mitchell. Number 2, Jarrett Allen. And number 1, Josh Giddey.
It's not the most take-ish list that you could have made.
Nope. It was I went for accuracy.
It's fine. I can appreciate wanting to be right rather than getting the clicks. All right, so this is top 5 things Anthony Edwards has achieved this postseason.
I like this. Okay.
Also, while we're on the topic of top 5s, to close ourselves out here, you transported my PJ Washington point from last week's top 5 onto Twitter and then kind of like went mini viral with it. I have to confront you on this. You even included Marc Gasol. This is my take.
It's a good take. I didn't realize I had stolen it from you, but now that you said that, I do remember.
I believe that was on an episode with you. Yeah, so you didn't even have to listen to Chris and I yap for that one.
Nope, it was definitely subconscious. I will admit to that. Did that go?
It's okay. Viral? You got your like 50 to 100 retweets or something, and
there it is.
Hopefully, you got a few followers out of it. Okay, honorable mention.
Nuggets fans mad at me.
Honorable mention, top 5 things Anthony Edwards achieved this postseason. Honorable mention, beating Kevin Durant. Number 5, getting Mike Conley back to the conference finals.
Amen.
Something we can all get behind. Won't get swept this time, I don't think. Number 4, beating Nikola Jokic.
That's number 4?
Number 4. Number 3, turning Karl-Anthony Towns into a winning player. Number 2, changing the Rudy Gobert narrative in a positive direction.
Change the way we look at the trade.
Didn't think we would ever see that. Number 1, the most unexpected, the biggest achievement of all, making the Minnesota Timberwolves cool again.
It's very true. They should bring back the old jerseys, 100%. I need to see Anthony Edwards in the old Kevin Garnett jersey. They should bring Kevin Garnett back for something. I don't know what.
He can replace A-Rod in the ownership group. That's been my vote for a while. I don't know how the finances shake out.
The only thing that I have not enjoyed about this Timberwolves run is just the presence of Alex Rodriguez on the sideline, looking like a boiled hot dog in all white. I don't need it.
I don't like anything about it. A hedge fund dude and Alex Rodriguez. Like I think Glenn Taylor's been a pretty bad owner, all things considered, but at the same time, couldn't we have done better? I understand you have to live in Minneapolis half the year and whatever, and you know, have an apartment out there in the snow, but if they had seen Ant-Man coming, somebody would have bid on this thing. And I guess Mr. Taylor's hoping that happens again. But yeah, maybe number 1 on this list should have been making Glenn Taylor even more money on the eventual sale of this franchise, because that's coming as well.
Good for Ant.
All right. Western Conference Finals kick off on Wednesday. We'll be back Friday recapping that plus Game 2 of the series we just talked about. To close out the week here on the Just Basketball Show, don't forget to hit follow or subscribe wherever you found us. Content daily across all our platforms on social media here on YouTube, audio platforms, of course, as well. Enjoy the hoops. We'll be back later this week.